The Great Hall of the Galactic Council stretched for nearly a mile in every direction, and today it was filled with the representatives of over 200 species who had gathered to discuss what they called the Human Problem Ambassador. Lisa Morgan sat in the human delegation's seat and watched as one alien species after another stood to speak against her people. And she kept her face perfectly calm even as the accusations grew more and more insulting. "The humans are reckless," declared High Counselor Drethvan of the Velnoxy Collective, his forearms waving dramatically as he spoke. "They destroyed an entire pirate fleet in the Outer Rim and caused damage to 3 of our trading stations in the process." Lisa wanted to remind him that those pirates had been attacking Velnoxy ships for months, and that the Velnoxy themselves had begged for human help. But she stayed silent and simply listened. The Torvaxian ambassador rose next. His scaled face twisted with what Lisa recognized as practiced outrage, and he pointed one clawed finger toward the human delegation. 2,000 human soldiers died protecting our border colonies last cycle, he admitted. But their methods were brutal, and their weapons caused unnecessary destruction to our infrastructure. And we demand compensation for the damages. Lisa felt something cold settle in her chest as she heard those words, because she knew the names of those 2,000 soldiers, and she had personally written letters to their families, explaining how they had died protecting aliens who apparently cared more about damaged buildings than human lives. Species after species rose to add their complaints, and the pattern became painfully clear. Humans had helped them all. Humans had bled for them all. And now they wanted to punish humanity for not being perfect while doing so. Korath Federation complained that human trade ships were too fast and made their own merchants look slow and inefficient. The Meridian Assembly criticized the human hospital ships for not staying longer in their system. Even though those ships had saved millions of lives during a plague outbreak, the Yulani Consortium accused humans of being too aggressive in defending convoys from raiders, as if the humans should have politely asked the pirates to stop murdering people. Through all of this, Lisa Morgan said nothing, and her silence began to unsettle some of the delegates, who had expected the fiery human ambassador to defend her people with passionate speeches. But Lisa had made a decision somewhere between the 3rd accusation and the 10th, and that decision was very simple. She was done when the final speaker finished his complaints about human engineering teams building bridges that were too sturdy for local aesthetics. Lisa slowly rose from her seat. The entire hall fell silent, and 200 species watched as the human ambassador reached up and removed the diplomatic credentials from around her neck. She placed them gently on the council table in front of her, looked around the vast chamber one final time, and then turned and walked toward the exit without saying a single word. Ambassador Morgan called out High Counselor Drethvan, his voice suddenly uncertain. "Do you not wish to respond to these concerns?" Lisa did not turn around, did not slow her pace, and did not acknowledge that anyone had spoken. And the sound of her boots on the marble floor echoed through the silent hall until the great doors closed behind her. Back on Earth 3 days later, Lisa sat in a secure conference room with Admiral Daniel Moore and Secretary of Defense Kevin Carter. And she told them everything that had happened to Admiral Moore was a tall man with gray hair and eyes that had seen too many good soldiers die in service to ungrateful allies. And his expression grew darker with every word Lisa spoke. 2,000 of my people, he said quietly, and they want us to pay them for the privilege of dying on their behalf. Secretary Carter leaned back in his chair and looked at the ceiling for a long moment before speaking. "I have been in politics for 30 years, he said, and I have learned that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply leave." Lisa nodded slowly because she had reached the same conclusion during her long journey home. "What are you proposing?" asked Admiral Moore. "No announcements," said Secretary Carter. No declarations of withdrawal, no angry speeches or demands for apologies. Because all of that gives them something to argue against and twist into making us look like the aggressors. He leaned forward and placed his hands flat on the table. We simply bring everyone home, he continued. Every soldier, every doctor, every engineer, every trade ship and humanitarian mission. And we do it quietly without explaining ourselves to anyone. They will demand answers, said Lisa, and we will give them none, replied Secretary Carter. Because we owe them nothing, not even an explanation. Admiral Moore was quiet for a moment. And then he nodded once. I will issue the orders tonight, he said, and by this time next month, there will not be a single human vessel operating outside our own territory. The orders went out through secure channels that same evening, reaching every human ship and station and outpost scattered across the galaxy. The messages were simple and identical. Return home immediately. Bring all personnel and equipment, leave nothing behind. And do not explain your departure to anyone on the medical frigate Hope's Light stationed near Torvax Prime. Captain Ryan Brooks read the orders twice to make sure he understood them correctly. We are really doing this? Asked his first officer. We are really doing this, confirmed Captain Brooks. And he began the shutdown procedures without another word on the distant world of Meridian 6. The Amy Collins received the same orders and felt a strange mix of sadness and relief as she began preparing to close the only advanced trauma center in the entire cluster. The patients, said one of her nurses. What will happen to them? That is no longer our concern, said Dr. Collins. And though the words felt harsh, she knew they were true because the galaxy had made it very clear that human help was not. Wanted Commander Laura Bennett shut down the early warning defense network that protected 12 alien systems from pirates and asteroids, and she did so without ceremony or regret all across the galaxy. Humans packed their bags and boarded their ships and headed home. And when aliens demanded to know what was happening, they received the same answer every time, orders, the humans would say. And then they would leave. The Galactic Council sent 17 formal inquiries to Earth in the first week. And each one received the same automated response. Your inquiry has been received. No explanations came because none were owed. And the galaxy that had complained so loudly about human involvement was about to learn what human absence truly meant. 3 weeks after Ambassador Lisa Morgan walked out of the Galactic Council chambers, the effects of the human withdrawal began to spread across the stars like ripples in a vast cosmic pond on Torvax Prime. The health minister stood on the landing platform and watched in disbelief as Captain Ryan Brooks and his medical frigate lifted off and disappeared into the sky. Wait, the minister called out, even though the ship was already gone. You cannot simply leave. We have patients who need treatment. We have agreements, but the ship was gone and the agreements meant nothing now. And the health minister was left standing alone on an empty platform, wondering what had just happened. Similar scenes played out on hundreds of worlds across the galaxy as humans quietly packed up their operations and headed home on Meridian 6. Amy Collins supervised the final evacuation of her hospital with the same calm efficiency she had shown during the worst days of the plague outbreak 2 years earlier. The equipment, said a Meridian official who had rushed to the hospital when he heard the humans were leaving. Surely you will leave the medical equipment for us to use. The equipment belongs to Earth, said Dr. Collins without looking up from her checklist. And Earth has recalled all of its property, but people will die without it. The official protested. Dr. Collins finally looked at him, and her eyes held no anger, but also no sympathy. Your council told us that our methods were unwelcome and our presence was a burden, she said. And we have decided to relieve you of that burden. She turned back to her work, and left the official standing there with his mouth open and no words coming out in the outer rim. Commander Lavra Bennett transmitted the final shutdown. Codes to the early warning satellite network that humanity had built and maintained for over a decade. The network had protected 12 alien systems from pirate attacks and asteroid impacts, and it had saved countless lives during its years of operation. Now the satellites went dark one by one, and the space lanes that had been safe for so long became blind and vulnerable. "Commander," said one of her officers, "the Torvaxian Defense Force is asking why we are shutting down the network." "Tell them the network is human property, and we are taking it home," said Commander Bennett. "They are asking who will protect their systems now." Commander Bennett paused for just a moment before answering. "That is their problem to solve," she said. And then she ordered her ship to set course for Earth. The Korath Federation was the first to feel the economic impact of the withdrawal, because humans had been their largest trading partners, and human goods had filled their markets for generations when the human trade ships stopped arriving. The Korath merchants waited for a few days and assumed it was a temporary delay when a week passed with no human vessels appearing at their stations. They sent inquiries to Earth and received only automated responses when a month passed. Panic began to set in as store shelves emptied and factories ran out of materials that only humans produced. Trade Minister Yulani called emergency meeting after emergency meeting, but there was nothing her government could do because they had no way to replace what the humans had provided. "Contact the other species," she ordered her staff. "Find alternative suppliers." But her staff came back with bad news. The other species did not make the things that humans made, and even if they did, they could not produce enough to meet the demand. The Korath economy had been built on the assumption that human trade would continue forever, and now that assumption was proving to be a fatal mistake. Meanwhile, the Galactic Council continued to send messages to Earth demanding explanations and threatening consequences. If the humans did not return to their duties, Earth did not respond to the threats any more than it had responded to the inquiries. And the council members began to realize that their words had no power over a species that simply refused to listen. Councillor Drethvin of the Velnoxy Collective grew more frustrated with each passing day, because his species depended on human escort ships to protect their trading convoys from pirates. Without those escorts, the Noxy merchants were afraid to leave their home systems, and trade that had flowed freely for decades suddenly stopped. "This is absurd," Drethvin declared at a council session. "The humans cannot simply abandon their responsibilities." "What responsibilities?" asked the Tervachian ambassador, and for the first time his voice held uncertainty rather than accusation. "They volunteered to help us," the ambassador continued. "They were never obligated to do anything, and we told them their help was unwelcome." Drethvin had no answer for that because the Torvaxian was right, and the truth of the situation was becoming harder to ignore. With each passing day, the humans had not been servants or subjects or conquered peoples forced to labor for their galactic masters. They had been allies who chose to help, and now they were choosing not to help. And there was absolutely nothing the council could do about it. Some species tried to fill the gaps left by the human withdrawal, but they quickly discovered how much work the humans had been doing. The Velnoxy attempted to run their own convoy escorts and lost 4 ships to pirates. In the first week, the Korath tried to manufacture their own replacement goods and produced items so inferior that their own people refused to buy them. The Meridians tried to train their own doctors using human medical texts and realized that human medicine was decades ahead of anything they could replicate. Slowly, painfully, the galaxy began to understand a truth that should have been obvious from the beginning. The humans had not been a burden or a problem or a source of trouble. They had been the ones holding everything together. And now that they were gone, Everything was falling apart. And the worst part was that the humans had not left in anger or demanded apologies or made any threats at all. They had simply walked away without a word. And that silence was more devastating than any declaration of war could ever have been. The Galactic Council sent 17 formal inquiries to Earth in the first week, and each one received the same automated response. Your inquiry has been received. No explanations came because none were owed. And the galaxy that had complained so loudly about human involvement was about to learn what human absence truly meant. 3 months after the humans walked away, the galaxy was burning not with actual fire in most places, though there was plenty of that too, but with the slow, devastating burn of systems failing and societies crumbling and millions of beings realizing that the life they had known was never coming back. The pirates came first, as everyone should have expected, but somehow nobody had prepared for without human patrol ships guarding the trade lanes. The raiders grew bold and then bolder still, attacking convoys in broad daylight and striking at stations that had been safe for generations in. The first month after the human withdrawal, pirate attacks increased by 200% by the third month. That number had reached 400% and was still climbing. General Cyrex of the Torvaxian Defense Force stood in his command center and stared at a holographic map covered in red warning markers, each one representing an attack or a distress call or a colony crying out for help that he could not provide. "We have lost contact with the outer colony of Thesser," reported one of his officers. "Raiders struck their supply convoy, and the colonists are running out of food. Send the Third Fleet," ordered General Cyrex, sir. "The Third Fleet is already responding to attacks on our mining stations in the Viller sector. Then send the Fourth Fleet. The Fourth Fleet was destroyed last week." "Sir, you signed the casualty reports yourself." General Cyrex closed his eyes and tried to remember a time when his job had not felt impossible. And he realized that time had ended exactly 3 months ago when the humans left in Meridian 6. The plague had returned. It was a different strain than the one that had nearly wiped out the population 2 years earlier. But it was just as deadly, and this time there was no human hospital to fight it. Dr. Amy Collins had left behind medical texts and treatment protocols. But the Meridian doctors did not have the training to use them properly, and they did not have the equipment that the humans had taken with them. The death toll rose from dozens to hundreds to thousands. And the Meridian government sent desperate pleas to Earth begging for help. Earth did not respond. The Koroth Federation collapsed on the 47th day after the human withdrawal, though the official announcement did not come until the 63rd day trade. Minister Yulani watched from her office window as riots swept through the capital city, and she knew that her government had failed its people in the most fundamental way possible. They had built their entire economy on human trade and human goods and human reliability, and they had never once stopped to consider what would happen if those things disappeared. Now they were finding out, and the answer was hunger and unemployment and civil war. "We should have been grateful," Yulani said to her empty office. "We should have said thank you, but it was too late for thank you now." And the sounds of breaking glass and screaming crowds filled the air outside her. Window High Counselor Drethven of the Volnoxy Collective had not slept in 11 days, and it showed in the trembling of his 4 hands and the desperate look in his compound eyes. The Volnoxy shipping lanes have become death traps, and his people were dying by the thousands as pirates picked off convoy after convoy with no human escorts to stop them. His political rivals were circling like predators, and there had already been 2 assassination attempts that his security forces had barely managed to stop. "You did this," his opponent said. "You drove the humans away with your arrogance, and now our people are paying the price." Drethven wanted to argue, but he could not, because they were right, and he knew they were right. And knowing it made everything worse. The asteroid swarm hit the Torvaxian colony of New Verith on the 71st day. And there was no warning because the early warning satellites were. Dark Commander Lara Bennett had shut them down before she left. And the Torvaxians had not been able to replace them or even understand how they worked. 6 million Torvaxians lived on New Verith. And when the asteroid struck, there was no time to evacuate and no shelters strong enough to protect them. The death toll was catastrophic. And General Cyrix wept openly when he received the reports because he had been stationed on New Verith as a young officer. And he still had friends there, friends who were now dead because the humans had left and nobody had been watching the sky send a message to Earth. General Cyrix ordered, his voice broken and hollow. Tell them what happened. Tell them we need help. The message was sent. And like all the other messages, it received only silence. In return, the Galactic Council held an emergency session to address the mounting crises. But the session quickly devolved into chaos as species blamed each other for driving the humans away. This is your fault. The Torvaxian ambassador screamed at High Counselor Drethvan. You led the accusations against them. You were right beside me, Drethvan shot back. You complained about damage to your infrastructure while their soldiers were still dying. Both of you are responsible, shouted Trade Minister Yulani, who had somehow escaped the collapse of her government. My people are starving because of your pride. The session ended with no resolutions and no agreements. Only more anger and more blame and more fear. But something else was happening too. Something quieter and more important than the shouting of politicians on worlds across the galaxy. Ordinary citizens were beginning to remember. A Torvaxian merchant remembered the human captain who had saved his ship from pirates 10 years ago and never asked for anything in return. A Meridian child remembered the human doctor who had cured her illness and smiled at her and told her she would grow up. Stronga Valnoxi engineer remembered working alongside human colleagues who treated him as an equal and shared their knowledge freely. These memories spread through conversations and social networks, and quiet moments of reflection. And slowly a new understanding began to take shape. The humans had not been conquerors or exploiters or the villains that the Council had portrayed them to be. They had been helpers and healers and protectors. And the galaxy had repaid their kindness with insults and accusations. Now the humans were gone. And the galaxy was learning the hardest lesson of all. You never truly appreciate what you have until it is taken away. And sometimes, when it is taken away, it does not come back. 6 months after the humans walked away, a coalition of desperate alien leaders gathered their finest ships and set course for Earth. Their High Counselor Drethvan was among them, though he was no longer truly a High Counselor since his government had stripped him of most of his powers after the third assassination attempt. General Cyrix came too, wearing the scars of battles he had lost and carrying the weight of millions of deaths he could not prevent. Trade Minister Yulani had somehow survived the collapse of the Korath Federation and emerged as a voice for those who wanted reconciliation with humanity. And she stood at the front of the coalition ship as it crossed into human space. Perhaps they will listen to us now, she said, though her voice carried more hope than confidence. Perhaps, said General Cyrix, or perhaps they will destroy us for entering their territory without permission. They would not do that, said Drethvan, though even he did not sound certain. The coalition fleet was not large. Just 15 ships carrying diplomats and officials from dozens of species. But it represented something that had never existed before. A unified galactic voice asking humans for help. They made it to the edge of Earth's solar system before the automated defense platforms powered up and blocked their path. The platforms were massive constructions of metal and energy weapons, and they hummed with barely contained power as they trained their sensors on the alien ships. Unidentified vessels, came an automated voice. You have entered restricted human space. State your purpose or withdraw immediately. Trade Minister Yulani stepped forward and spoke into the communication system. We are representatives of the Galactic Council and affiliated governments, she said. We have come to speak with Earth's leaders about the current crisis. There was a long pause, and then a different voice came through the speakers. One that Drethvan recognized immediately. This is Ambassador Lisa Morgan, said the voice, and on the view screen her face appeared. Calm and unreadable, she looked exactly as she had 6 months ago when she walked out of the council chambers. Except now there was something harder in her eyes. Something that had not been there before. Ambassador Morgan, said Yulani quickly. We need to talk. The galaxy is falling apart without human assistance, and we are here to discuss how we might repair our relationship. Lisa was quiet for a moment, and when she spoke her voice held no warmth. You said you did not need us, she said. You called us reckless and barbaric and demanded we pay you for the privilege of dying on your behalf. That was a mistake, Yulani said. A terrible mistake that we now recognize. Do you? Asked Lisa. Do you truly recognize it, or do you simply recognize that you need something from us again? General Cyrix stepped forward before anyone could stop him. I recognize it, he said. I stood silent when the council attacked your people. Even though human soldiers had saved my life and the lives of everyone on my homeworld. I said nothing when I should have spoken, and for that I'm ashamed. Lisa looked at him for a long moment, and something flickered across her face that might have been respect. When we bled for you, she said softly. What did you say? Nobody answered because they all knew what they had said. They had said that human methods were brutal, that human soldiers were reckless, that human help came with too high a cost. They had said everything except thank you. Go home, said Lisa. There is nothing for you here. Please, said Drethvan. And the words sounded strange coming from him because he had never begged for anything in his life. My people are dying, the shipping lanes are killing fields. We cannot survive without help. Then you should have thought about that before you turned your back on the people who were helping you, said Lisa. And the transmission ended. The coalition fleet drifted in space for 3 days, hoping that someone would contact them, hoping that the door might open just a crack on the second day. A small shuttle approached the fleet and docked with the command ship. The pilot was a young human woman in civilian clothes, and she carried no weapons and no official credentials. I am not here on behalf of Earth's government, she said when they brought her before the coalition leaders. I came on my own because I think you need to hear something. And what is that? Asked the General Cyrix. My brother was one of the 2,000 soldiers who died protecting your border colonies, she said. Looking directly at him, he wrote me letters about your people, about how grateful the colonists were, about how he felt like he was making a difference. Her voice cracked slightly, but she continued. He believed in the alliance between our peoples, she said. He believed we were building something good together, and then he died. And your council called his sacrifice a burden. Nobody spoke because there was nothing to say. I do not know if Earth will ever help you again, the woman said. But I know this. My brother would have wanted peace. He would have wanted reconciliation. And he would have wanted you to understand what you threw away. She left without another word. And the coalition leaders stood in silence long after she was gone when they returned to their home systems. They carried her words with them, and those words spread through the galaxy like seeds falling on fertile ground on Torvax Prime. General Cyrix recorded a public message, taking personal responsibility for his silence during the Council's attacks on humanity. I failed my allies and I failed my own honor, he said. I do not ask the humans to forgive me because forgiveness must be earned. But I want them to know that at least one Torvaxian understands what he lost. Other voices joined his. Not many at first, but growing steadily. Citizens and officials and survivors who remembered. human kindness, and wanted the universe to know that they remembered it. It was not an apology organized by governments or approved by councils. It was something more powerful than that. It was the truth, spoken by ordinary people who had finally found the courage to say what they should have said long ago and somewhere on Earth. Ambassador Lisa Morgan watched the messages coming in from across the galaxy. And for the first time in 6 months, she allowed herself to feel something other than anger. It was not hope, not yet. But it was the first small step towards something that might one day become hope, if the galaxy was willing to keep walking. 1 year after Ambassador Lisa Morgan walked out of the Galactic Council chambers, she received an invitation to return. The invitation was not a demand or a summons or a diplomatic formality. It was a simple request written in plain language and signed by representatives from every species in the known galaxy. "We would like you to come back." The invitation read, "Not because we need you, though we do, but because we have something to say and we want you to hear it." Lisa showed the invitation to Admiral Daniel Moore and Secretary of Defense Kevin Carter. And for a long time, the three of them sat in silence. "It could be a trick," said Admiral Moore. "It could be," agreed Lisa. "But I do not think it is." "What makes you say that?" asked Secretary Carter. Lisa thought about the messages that had been flooding into Earth for months. The personal testimonies and public apologies and quiet admissions of guilt from beings across the galaxy, because this did not come from their governments, she said. This came from their people. She decided to go, not as an ambassador with authority to negotiate, but as a witness to whatever the galaxy wanted to show her. The council chambers looked different than she remembered, not in their physical structure, but in their atmosphere a year ago. This hall had been filled with accusation and self-righteous anger. Now it was filled with something else entirely, something that felt almost like grief. High Counselor Drethvan stood at the center podium. Though his title was now merely ceremonial since his own people had stripped him of real power, he looked older than Lisa remembered, his forearms hanging at his sides instead of waving dramatically, his compound eyes dull with exhaustion and regret. 1 year ago, he began, I stood in this very spot and accused humanity of being a burden on our civilization. His voice echoed through the silent hall. I said that human soldiers were reckless, that human methods were brutal, that humanity owed us compensation for the privilege of dying in our defense. He paused, and when he continued, his voice was barely above a whisper. I was wrong. The words hung in the air like something sacred, and Lisa felt her heart beating faster in her chest. The humans did not owe us anything, Drethvan continued. They came to us freely. They helped us freely. They bled and died for us freely, and we repaid their sacrifice with contempt. He turned to face Lisa directly. I cannot undo what I did, he said. I cannot bring back the dead or heal the wounds or restore what was lost. But I can say what I should have said a year ago. He bowed all four of his arms in the traditional, the Noxie gesture of deepest respect. Thank you, he said. Thank you for everything you did for my people. And I am sorry for how we treated you, one by one. Representatives from other species rose to speak. General Cyrix spoke of the human soldiers who had fought alongside Torvaxian forces, soldiers whose names he had memorized and whose families he had written to personally trade. Minister Yulani spoke of the human traders who had been fair and honest partners, who had helped the Karath build their economy and asked for nothing but friendship in return. A Meridian doctor spoke of watching Dr. Amy Collins work miracles during the plague, saving lives that everyone else had given up on. Each speaker added their voice to the chorus of acknowledgement, not asking for human return, but simply admitting the truth of what had happened. And then came the moment that Lisa would remember for the rest of her life. Small Torvaxian child was led to the podium. A girl no more than 7 years old with bright eyes and scales that shimmered blue and green in the chamber lights. My name is Kira, the child said. her voice small but clear. "And I want to tell you about the humans who saved my family." She told the story of how raiders had attacked her colony. Our parents had been trapped in a burning building. Our squad of human soldiers had charged through the flames to rescue them. "They did not know us," Kira said. "We were strangers to them, but they came anyway. And one of them got hurt very badly saving my mother." She looked directly at Lisa with eyes that held no politics and no agenda. Only the simple honesty of a child. "My parents told me I should say something today," Kira said, "and I asked them what I should say. And they said I should say thank you." She paused and took a deep breath. "The humans never asked us to say thank you," she said. "But we should have." The chamber was silent, and Lisa felt tears streaming down her face, even though she had promised herself she would not cry on Earth. Admiral Moore and Secretary Carter watched the broadcast in the command center, surrounded by officers and officials who had gathered to witness whatever was happening. "Well," said Secretary Carter quietly. "I did not expect that." Admiral Moore said nothing, but his eyes were wet and his jaw was clenched tight with emotion. The broadcast continued for hours as speaker after speaker added their voice. And when it finally ended, the galaxy waited to see what humanity would do. Days passed with no response from Earth, and some began to fear that their words had not been enough. Then, on the 7th day, a single human ship appeared at the edge of Council space. It was not a warship or a diplomatic vessel or a trade convoy. It was a small civilian craft carrying a single passenger, Ambassador Lisa. Morgan stood in the cockpit and looked at the stars that stretched out before her. The same stars that human soldiers and doctors and engineers had traveled through to help beings they had never met. She thought about everything that had happened in the past year. The anger and the silence and the slow, painful journey toward this moment. She opened the communication channel to the Galactic Council. "This is Ambassador Lisa Morgan," she said, "representing the people of Earth." The response came immediately. A dozen voices speaking over each other in their eagerness to reply. "Ambassador Morgan," said High Counselor Drethvan, his voice trembling with something that sounded like hope. "We are so glad to hear from you. Does this mean, can we hope? Is there a chance? I am not here to negotiate terms or sign treaties," Lisa said, cutting him off. "I am not here to promise that things will go back to the way they were." She paused, choosing her next words carefully. "But I am here to listen," she said. "Truly listen this time to what you have to say. And I am hoping that you will listen to us as well." There was a long silence, and then Drethvan spoke again. "We will listen," he said. "I promise you, we will listen." "Then perhaps," said Lisa, "perhaps we can begin again. Not as masters and servants, not as helpers and helped, but as equals who respect each other. That is all we ask," said Drethvan. "That is all we have ever truly wanted." Lisa smiled for the first time in a year. A small smile, but a real one. "Then let us talk," she said. "And this time, let us do it right." The ship moved forward into Council space, not fast and not slow, just moving steadily toward a future that nobody could predict, but everyone hoped would be better than the past. It was not a triumphant return or a dramatic reconciliation. It was simply the beginning of a conversation, but sometimes, after all the silence and all the pain and all the lessons learned the hard way, a conversation is enough. It was certainly more than the galaxy deserved, but the humans had never given the galaxy what it deserved. They had always given it something better.